With the custom animation now ready to go, we need a skeletal mesh to apply that to and a character to actually use it with. So let's go and take a look at creating a custom character. Character is one of the built-in Blueprint classes. So we can right click, we're inside of our My Content folder, Blueprint class, character. I'll name this one My Character, and we'll go ahead and open it up. Now, if we look at My Character, a character class by default, we have a few things that we're going to care about. The primary one being our mesh. So this is the mesh we're going to show, our skeletal mesh. Now, we only have one in our example. So we're going to go to the Details panel, Skeletal Mesh, and choose the mannequin. So now we have our skeletal mesh. By default, it doesn't come in properly, just the way it was set up. So we will drag it down so it looks roughly appropriate, somewhere around 80 or 90. And then we'll go ahead and rotate it to -90. The goal is to make the blue arrow, which is our forward direction in our character, facing the forward direction of the actual mannequin. Okay, so we're good to go there. Now, animation. Well, we have the two different animation modes that we're going to primarily focus on, our blueprint and our asset. But for now, let's go ahead and go to asset, anim to play, and let's throw in an animation, like let's say our idle. Now you can see our character's moved over to the idle animation. And if we were to look at him in the game, we would see that he is using the idle animation. So I'm going to drag him in from my content browser, and now we have my character and then the default third-person character that came with the template. Now, for example, let's go ahead and delete the third-person character that's in our world. We can also go in and delete the network player start. You can see it on the far end here. That way we can make sure only our player is being used. Now, if we were to hit play right now, it's going to spawn in another character. It's not going to work right. We are not telling the game that we want to use this character for our purposes. To quickly set that up, if we scroll down in the details panel for the character, or we type in possess, I'm going to type PEOS, and we scroll down a little bit, you can find pawn, auto possess player. We'll set this to player 0, so that's going to be the first player that wants to take control in this world. We hit play, and there we go. We're now possessing. Problem is, we're not really seeing what we want because we don't have a camera set up. It's just going to default to right in the middle of our character. So let's finish up our character. We'll open our character back up again. We want to add a camera. So we'll add a camera component. Make sure the camera component is part of our capsule component. So it's going to be next to our mesh. And we can move it to where we want. So if we were to take this camera and grab it, move to the translate tool, we can put our camera wherever we want it. We'll hit play, and there we go. Now we can't move our character, and our camera is fixed to this location. So we have those two issues to fix. The camera one's fairly simple. There's a spring arm built into the engine. So we'll type in spring for add component, and we'll end up with the spring arm. Now, I had the camera chosen, so spring arm became a child. That's not what I want. We're going to move the spring arm onto our capsule, so it aims at the capsule for the character, and move the camera under the spring arm. Okay, now that we've got that, it still doesn't look right. Our camera, remember we moved. We want to reset it, so make sure your camera is set to these settings. Our spring arm, because it was a child, is offset, so let's reset it. And now you can see we have it set up like we want it. The spring arm is looking at the capsule as a child, and the camera is on the end of it. And if we were to run this again, now we get a little bit better position. Let's move our spring arm up just so we can see maybe somewhere near the back end and hit play to test. Looking a little bit better, but we still can't move. Since we're using the third person template, we're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to go into the content third person blueprint, blueprints folder, and open up the existing third person character. And we're just going to copy out the stuff we want. Since I'm using a keyboard and mouse, I'm going to select this middle part, mouse input for looking around, jump for jumping, and the movement input for moving around with our arrows. We don't need the gamepad, VR, or touch input because we're not using it for the example. So I've gone and done the selection. Now I will copy, go back into my character, go into its event graph. I'm going to select everything that's in there. You don't have to, but I'm going to. And delete it so we have a clean graph. Now you could right click and paste, or Control V, and it's going to paste in the input. You could also go up to edit and paste. Now that we have this, our character will be accepting input. We'll compile and save. We'll hit play to test. And there we go. I can move around with the mouse. I can move forward, backwards, left, and right, and jump. We kind of have a small problem in the fact that no animations with idle are playing, but that's because that's what we've told it to do. We have told it that we simply want to control our character and play the idle animation because that's the fixed animation that we've chosen. So we're going to want to use an animation blueprint. Now there's a couple ways of doing this. We can close down our character now. We can right click in our content browser and go to animation, animation blueprint. Or we could open up the skeletal mesh that we're using. So I could, for example, open up my third person character again, click on my mesh component. Here's my skeletal mesh here. I could double click on it to open it. Remember, it's got shortcuts to anything that's associated with the skeleton. So we could go into create asset and create a new animation blueprint from here. Or we could go into any of the other ones like the skeleton or an existing animation blueprint and create a new animation blueprint. In this case, I'm going to go back into my content browser, closing these down, right click, animation, animation blueprint, but any of the other ways would have worked. We don't need a parent class because we're not going to inherit anything. So we'll just leave this default with none. But you need to target the skeleton that this animation blueprint will be bound to. Remember how I mentioned we saw our list of all of our blueprints and meshes and animations linked to the skeleton? The skeleton controls what will and will not work. So here's our skeleton. We'll hit OK. Let's go and name this to my character AnimBP. Now you notice I created it in the wrong folder because we were still in our third person blueprints. That's easy enough. We'll click on it, drag it to my content and move it. It's going to make sure it's good to go. In our my content folder, we now have my character and a blueprint, and we're ready to start looking at setting up this animation blueprint so that way we can have a more robust animation system.